And there I was the girl from Suits.
This One's Wife. The Deletion of Criticism. Sussex Squad Intimidation. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You'll recall last week that I reported on Brooke Shields, where she had criticised This One's Wife in a podcast where she was a guest on India Hicks's podcast. In it, she had explained that she regarded This One's Wife as too precious and interrupted her at the South by Southwest panel back in 2024. Well, as reported by People.com, just 1 week after it was first posted, a podcast video in which Brooke Shields called This One's Wife too precious has been deleted. As I explained, the podcast was problematic for This One's Wife because it criticised her. That's the provision of challenge fuel. She's been spoken about, so that's fine, but suggesting that she was too precious and interrupting her and referencing that interruption in the podcast was problematic for her because it challenged the notion that she's an interesting person and thus threatened her need for control. Naturally, for this podcast to be removed is something which This One's Wife would favour, because not only does it mean that the existence of something criticising her has been deleted, it is also the fact that the response of doing so demonstrates, in her mind at least, that she's powerful. There is, of course, an interesting collateral consequence in that the reasons why she was criticised in the first place get aired again, even by one of the supine publications such as People.com, because it goes on to state in the article, Shields sat down for a conversation with King Charles's goddaughter, India Hicks, on an episode of her podcast released earlier this month, which is now no longer available on her website, according to multiple reports. A link to the podcast currently leads to a page not found message on Hicks's Substack. In the episode, Shields reflected on a South by Southwest panel she and This One's Wife spoke on in March 2024. Shields recalled that This One's Wife told the panel a story about writing a letter in support of gender equality at age 11. On Hicks's podcast, Shields described This One's Wife's story as too serious. She stated, Katie asked the first question to This One's Wife, and she talks about how at a young age she was already advocating for women, Shields said. She starts telling a story about how when she was 11, and she keeps saying, well, when I was 11, I saw this commercial, and they were talking about how washing dishes was for women, Shields continued. And she said, I didn't think only women wash dishes. It wasn't fair, so I wrote to the company. Shields told Hicks, she kept saying she was 11. She wrote to the company. They changed the text. They changed the commercial. It was just too precious. And I was like, they're not going to want to sit here for 45 minutes and listen to anybody be precious or serious. Shields said she interrupted This One's Wife to try and lighten the tone of the panel. I go, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I've got to interrupt you there for 1 minute. I was trying not to be rude, but I wanted to be funny because it was so serious. She then joked to the audience, I just want to give everyone here a context as to how we're different. When I was 11, I was playing a prostitute. Shields said the place went insane after the remark and the panel was more relaxed as a result. Accordingly, not only did this at the time amount to challenge fuel for This One's Wife, it gets mentioned again as a consequence of the deletion. So, as ever, the collateral consequence arises for This One's Wife. She's criticised initially, then the podcast is deleted, but news outlets still mention the original podcast content, so there's a fresh round of criticism for her. Now, interestingly, what People omits to tell you is why it was deleted. Now, there's no suggestion that it was at the hand of This One's Wife, but as I mentioned, she is not going to be unhappy about its removal. The reason that it was taken down is as a consequence of the online harassment of both Brooke Shields and India Hicks by This One's Wife supporters, members of the Sussex Squad. So whilst it's not This One's Wife herself who has protested, although she's not beyond doing so, remember what she did in relation to Piers Morgan all those years ago, it's her supporters who have taken up the cudgels of online oppression against people who are expressing their freedom of speech. For instance, on X, they bizarrely they accused both Brooke and India of being racist Karens and bitches over the podcast anecdote. One wrote, "Damn, now I need to write fuck you on Brooks' social media. Apparently something about this one's wife triggers the bitch in some women." It's hardly a surprise to find that this one's wife's supporters have intimidated and insulted two women who are allowed to express their opinions about this one's wife. First of all, this one's wife takes herself far too seriously and is boring. Brooke Shields did nothing wrong. But even if you deem that it was inappropriate of her to share the anecdote, she's allowed to, in the same way that this one's wife, unfortunately, is allowed to bore us all with her tales of what she did when she was 11, how she continues to talk about herself, and how she did so on her podcast, not telling anybody anything of insight in relation to business. But naturally, because she is such a hypocrite, what she is allowed to do, nobody else is allowed to do. Or if you do something, she's allowed to criticise you, but you're not allowed to criticise her. And her dim-witted supporters, who just have one brain cell between them, have demonstrated their nasty nature again by not allowing people to express an opinion, calling them Karens and racists and bitches, demonstrating their gutter-like behaviour towards these individuals to the extent that they've caused so many problems for Brooke Shields and India Hicks as a consequence of their online bullying that they've caused the deletion of the podcast. Now, who is it who has repeatedly spoken out about online safety? Who is it who reminds us of the necessity of protecting children and people at large about the dark side of the internet? Who is it who claims that she was the most bullied person on the internet? Who is it who regularly holds herself out as being a guardian of individuals on the internet? Ah, yes, this one's wife. But what a surprise. Yet again, her odious supporters engage in the online harassment of two women expressing their opinions. And where's this one's wife in all of this? Where is her condemnation of the behaviour of the Sussex squad for their online activity? Where is her condemnation for the way that they bullied and smeared and insulted Catherine in relation to her cancer? Where is her criticism in relation to the way that these individuals behave towards YouTubers? Utter silence. And we know there's utter silence because she doesn't give a rat's ass about anybody other than herself. And if her supporters are attacking people that she sees as her critics, then so much the better, because it means that they are being punished and silenced, and that is what she wants. She is such a hypocritical woman that she wanks on about online safety, whilst in effect, through her silence, endorsing the online bullying and harassment of a variety of different people. This woman claims to be a feminist. She claims to be a supporter and advocate for women, yet her sister-in-law, an actress, and a podcaster, a goddaughter of King Charles, all of them women, where is she when it comes to supporting them? Nowhere to be seen. Why? Because it suits her for them to be attacked and bullied. Once again, the Duchess of Industrial Beige demonstrates her odious credentials as a horrible human being, a hypocritical narcissist, who is delighted when her critics are attacked and shut up, and whinges whenever she is criticised. Another example of how the deletion of criticism suits the narcissist and how it has come as a consequence of her unpleasant and nasty and toxic supporters. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.